Beware, citizen, you are now departing from the world of allowable opinion. The Tom Woods Show.
Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, February 21st, 2014, and I'm telling you guys, you are in for such a treat today. I am so glad to be able to welcome Bill Kaufman to the program, and if you have not read Bill Kaufman, well, better late than never. I hardly know what to tell you guys in introducing Bill. There's nobody like him. There's nobody who writes like him. There's no one who thinks quite like him. There's no one who expresses himself the way Bill does. I don't really know what to say. Words fail me with Bill. Every minute I can spend talking to this guy is a minute I deeply cherish. I want to tell you, before I give you Bill's credentials and what he's up to today, a little story. Back from 2008, Ron Paul was getting ready for his Rally for the Republic. Those of us who have been around for a while will recall that event. This was held the week of the Republican convention where they were going to nominate John McCain officially. And right down the street at the Target Center, Ron Paul's holding his own event. And he didn't want to call it a counter-convention, but in a way that's what it was, let's be honest about it. And what an event it was. And Ron gave such a fantastic speech. This was an opportunity for me, too. I spoke at this event, and I don't usually speak to 10,000 people, so this was a great, great opportunity. But what a wonderful day that none of us who were there will ever forget. Well, I mention this because in the weeks leading up to the event, Dr. Paul called me and said, we've got to get a good anti-war speaker at this event. He said, whom do you recommend? And without a moment's hesitation, I said, Bill Kaufman. We got to have Bill Kaufman. And sure enough, Bill blew the roof off the place. What a fantastic, moving, beautiful, and beautifully delivered speech. And unfortunately, it's basically impossible to find it online. Somebody put it up on YouTube, and then that person, I guess, violated YouTube's terms of service or something, had his account taken down, and with it went Bill's speech. So if you have got a copy of this thing, please put it up there on YouTube. There are enough cute cat videos on YouTube to last people a lifetime. Bill Kaufman's speech deserves to be up there. Well, what does Bill do? Well, Bill's an author of many books, including my personal favorite, which I've reviewed. You can find it online, Ain't My America, The Long, Noble History of Anti-War Conservatism and Middle American Anti-Imperialism. Dispatches from the Muck Dog Gazette, a mostly affectionate account of a small town's fight to survive. Look Homeward, America, in search of reactionary radicals and front porch anarchists. And most recently, Bye Bye Miss American Empire. You can't go wrong reading a book by Bill Kaufman. You can read a lot of Bill's articles over at The American Conservative, theamericanconservative.com. He also wrote the screenplay to Copperhead, an independent film that came out last year, 2013, directed by Ron Maxwell. Bill is also a contributor over at frontporchrepublic.com. And it's my pleasure right now to welcome Bill to the program. Bill, I'm so glad to be able to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Bill, you're one of these guests I could talk to forever, and there's so many things we could talk about. I had you on the Peter Schiff Show talking about Copperhead, and then we've talked about other topics in the past, but you really are the decentralist, secessionist sort of guy. I mean, I've been talking about state nullification, and you make me feel like a pathetic wimp compared to what you're calling for, and I'm totally in favor of it. But let's start talking about, first of all, some of the maybe tamer, but nevertheless still interesting and exciting sorts of movements that we've seen little by little cropping up around the country. Just the movements in favor of splitting up one of the states into two parts. Now, some people might think that's not a big deal, but anything that deifies the American Union in somebody's mind, I think, is a step forward.
Yeah, actually, those are the ones I'm most excited about, and largely for personal reasons. I mean, as a native and resident of rural upstate New York, I mean, we're essentially a colony up here, Yeah, I mean, I would like to see many more stars actually on the flag. I think the first thing we do is subtract two, Alaska and Hawaii, which were fruits of the Cold War. They were only admitted into the Union for militarily strategic reasons. We stole Hawaii helped overthrow Queen Liliuokalani. And then it was annexed, I might add, over the fierce objections of the great Grover Cleveland.
Let me interject, Bill. In defense of rural America and middle America, we didn't steal Hawaii. They did.
I know. You're right. But anyway, I trust that earlier this week you all honored Cleveland, by the way, on President's Day.
We talked about Cleveland on President's Day, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Grover Cleveland. I mean, you think around here we think just another 300-pound buffalo lard ass sitting on a bar stool, wolfing down chicken wings and cursing the Bills. No way. Cleveland was one of the last adherents of the old Jeffersonian faith domestically, and he was an anti-expansionist. He appointed the best Secretary of State in American history, Walter Q. Gresham, who was a pretty hardcore anti-imperialist. Cleveland's one of these figures. You mean like Martin Van Buren earlier? If the United States had simply deferred to upstate New York on all political matters, we'd be in much better shape, Tom.
I'm pretty sure there was already agitation for going after Cuba and causing problems earlier in the 1890s, and that Cleveland actually said that even if Congress were to pass a declaration of war, then as the chief executive, I would just simply refuse to call out the army. Like, I would refuse to do anything. I would not direct the armed forces to do anything. And I thought, I'm never going to live to see a president like that ever again. Like, that is a metaphysical impossibility.
Right, yeah. I forget who called it a wise and masterly inactivity.
Yeah, but, that's right. That's right.
And in part, I think his obesity maybe there's a good side to, I think, torpor and sluggishness.
Well, also it makes him seem human. Instead of these, larger than life, so to speak, people, who seem perfect in every way and they have the ideal family and we're all supposed to care about what their golf handicap is and whatever. He just seemed like obviously a regular guy. I mean, look at him.
Yeah, right. Knocking down schooners of beer at the local tavern. So, but anyway, we, as you and I always do, we get into digression.
Yeah, right, but that was totally worth it. All right, let's get back to the states breaking up.
There are... these movements are all over the place. California, Arizona, Maryland, New York, and they have there's a long history. I mean, California, for instance, when it came into the Union in 1850, over the objection of the mostly Spanish grandees in the South, it was just assumed that, okay, California is going to split into two states very soon. And throughout the 1850s, its first decade of existence, California legislature was primarily occupied with considering measures to split California. In fact, I think it was 1859, both the state Senate, state assembly, the governor, all approved legislation for an advisory referendum on the subject, but then war intervenes, and it's sort of forgotten. But then the issue, it keeps popping up in California. In the early 20th century, the agitation for two Californias comes from the north, because there's the thought that the southern part of the state is sort of socially retrograde. San Franciscans used to call the big city to the south Puritangelus. I think a moniker rather less appropriate today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, things have changed.
Right. And then 1940, 41. There's a movement to break off the very northern part of California, combine it with southern Oregon. Both regions had felt ignored by Sacramento and Salem, and create a state of Jefferson. But war comes, the movement dies. But then in the 90s, it's resumed. Northern California wants statehood. And one of my weaknesses sometimes is for certain politicians, and I've always been kind of fond of Jerry Brown. Never as governor, but always as a non-governor. He's sort of like a Johnny Appleseed of ideas who throws things out, and some of them are kind of interesting seedlings. But Jerry's father, Pat, after he was defeated by Ronald Reagan for governor in 1966, wrote this really splenetic, bilious book in which he said, "You know what? because he blamed Southern California for his defeat because they voted for Reagan. He said, I've always been in favor of two states. It doesn't make sense having this huge state governed, from one city located 400 miles from the population base, and two Californias is inevitable. Now, I've hoped that Jerry Brown, as he enters his presumably his last act, I still have some hope that he's going to pull this out of his bag of tricks someday and propose a split state California, because it's unbelievable. 35 million people governed from one city.
No, it's totally crazy. And if you compare California's economy to economies of other countries in the world, it's probably in the top 10. It might be like the 7th largest economy in the world, ruled by one city.
Yeah, and there's there's something in it for everyone too. That's what makes it politically possible. In the North you'd get somewhat probably conservative-ish Democrats, but in the South, you'd probably get two Spanish-speaking senators. It's ridiculous that this now heavily Latino state has as its only two senators Boxer and Feinstein. Who hardly represent the breadth and diversity of California. So it's what's going on in California. There's renewed agitation. There is in New York as well. The high point here was 1969. Norman Mailer, the novelist, his campaign for mayor of New York City, which he ran on a 51st state platform, advocating New York City leaving New York State. And once it left New York State, his other slogan was "Power to the neighborhoods." He would devolve pretty much all municipal powers, whether trash collection or law enforcement or schooling, to the most local level possible. Mailer said he was to the left of the liberals and to the right of the conservatives.
I like it.
Which it's wisdom's place. He also said he was against fluoridation of the water and in favor of freeing Huey Newton.
How about that?
He wanted for one day, 1 week of the year, to close down Wall Street and have a World Series of stickball. So as you can imagine, like say what the New York Times would think of these proposals. But Mailer also saw a kind of spiritual rebirth coming out of what do you want to call it, secession or division or fissioning, because he thought that the impersonal and remote style of governing and even of modern life had sort of deadened civic America. And his thought was that by returning responsibility to the most local level, you can have kind of an enlivening of neighborhoods, of streets, and there's going to be a flourishing, not only politically but culturally as well. And I think it's absolutely true. I think Mailer's, there was a little bit of prankishness in the campaign, but I think it was one of the really prophetic political campaigns of our time. And anyway, I write about some of these things actually in a book of mine that came out a couple years ago. Can I give it a plug, Tom?
No, please do. Yeah, and I was going to tell people about it when I wrapped up, but I want them to know about it. Yeah, go ahead. Bye Miss American Empire.
It's called Bye Bye Miss American Empire. Came out in I think 2010, and it treats it treats the split state movements. It treats the secession of states like Alaska and Hawaii. The history of how they came into the Union, and a discussion of the folks who want to take them out of the Union. And it's a sort of, and undergirding it all is a kind of decentralist manifesto, and which I throw a lot of jokes, some funny, some probably groaners.
No, yours are good. No, you actually, it's very hard. One of the hardest things, I think, for a writer to pull off is to be funny in print. It's much easier to be funny when you can have voice inflections and make funny faces, but to be funny in print, it's so easy to fall flat in print, and you pull it off consistently. You are probably one of, I would say, there are about a half dozen people whose prose I genuinely envy. I would say, Joe Sobran was one. He was the master of the pen, really. Joe, yours, maybe Pat Buchanan also, maybe Thomas Fleming at Chronicles, even though I don't think he likes me that much. Doesn't matter. I still like his prose. I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of him. Let's just say, as a matter of fact, I think I am on the wrong side of him, and it hasn't been fun. But that's good stuff. So people, if you're wondering what to read, gosh, I've got to, I don't know exactly what to read. I don't feel like picking up Mises' Human Action because it scares me. Read Bill Kaufman. I mean, I love the stuff that you do. Now, let me ask you this, though. When we say there's a long history behind some of these split state movements, in a way, that's kind of discouraging because it kind of means that for an awfully long time, there's been some momentum for this, or at least the momentum extends far back in time, and yet nothing ever happens.
That's true. Although, I mean, there are instances of states being formed out of larger states.
But West
Maine
Virginia doesn't count.
Out of Massachusetts.
Right. West Virginia doesn't count. Right.
Right. West Virginia being the most recent one in 1863. So yeah, I mean, there is. It's discouraging, and yet hope springs eternal. I think the discouraging thing is that the boundaries of acceptable opinion in this country have narrowed so much, even in my lifetime.
Oh yeah.
So the ideas of say dividing California into 2 or 3 states, dividing New York. I mean, in a just world, these would absolutely be on the table.
Yeah, of course they should.
It's incredible they aren't, and in fact, a lot of people, especially in California, it was just assumed inevitably the state's going to split. I mean, California can have projected a population of 50 million by I think 2045 or 2050. One unitary state government for 50 million people? You got to be kidding me! And yet, people are afraid to raise the issue, because they don't want to be seen as kooky or somewhere outside the mainstream. And yet, if you talk to ordinary people, those who aren't simply parroting Fox News or MSNBC, I think they respond pretty favorably to these sort of things, especially if they're any wholesome, any salutary political movement has to be based in love, and now otherwise it's not worth it. I mean, so these movements, the best of them are based in the love of one's region, one's home, its history, its music, its accent, its cuisine, all that sort of thing. And there's usually also an element of resentment against the capital. State capital's not listening to us. And while that may be an essential element, the resentment part can't overwhelm the love, or it just dissipates into sputtering, and it's kind of nasty,
Bill, when you mentioned the problem of allowable opinion having contracted so much, I want to tell you that at the intro of this program, the announcer says, "Beware, citizen, you are now departing from the world of allowable opinion," and then it introduces the show. So, I mean, it's just right up your alley. Now,
so are we on orange alert, red alert, what?
Yeah, right. Yeah, good question. Well, listen, let me ask you, though, how do you connect war into all this? I mean, what does war do to people, not in the sense of it creates a lot of government agencies and some of them wind up staying on longer than the war and the taxes wind up higher. I mean, I get that, and that's all very important. But there's something that seems to be done to the soul of the people, and particularly to the kind of salutary local patriotisms that you're talking about. But can you help us sort of put our finger on what exactly that is that happens to them?
Sure, yeah. War is, in times of war, one is hectored, one is instructed, one is mandated to care more about, Baghdad than one's own backyard. I mean, you're supposed to set your sights on distant things, and so all sorts of things are centralized. As you say, the economy is centralized, political power is centralized, but also social life and cultural life are centralized as well. Everyone's got to get behind the war effort, this national effort. And it's, I mean, just, empirically, I mean, you can look at, the great flourishing of regional or local writing, whether prose, poetry, whatever. I mean, these things tend to peak in times of peace, say 1850s, and then there's a sharp decline in times of war, 1860s. The same is true, 1890s, early 1900s, very fertile. The teens with the war goes down. In the 30s, one of the great decades of American writing. The 40s, we have a decline, and I think that it's with empire you get Lady Gaga, you know? I mean, it's...
I know. But Americans love her. Isn't that bizarre? Like, what country am I living in? Like, what in the world happened, right? That
I know.
Like everybody who's involved in entertainment is involved in... I mean, they feel obligated to be as coarse and disgusting and just... And they have to be as in your face about the fact that they despise half the public. They have at least half the public. They have to make sure you know that. Well, you know what? I think we got the message, right? We hear it. You have different values than a lot of people in America. We got you.
Yes, but you know the archons of the empire will not be satisfied until every son and daughter of every traditionalist culture, no matter how remote from the United States, every one of these people is listening to Lady Gaga.
Yeah, I know.
You know? I mean, you know, the price of empire is America's soul, and that price is too high, said Senator William Fulbright, who was the only good bill ever to come out of Arkansas, I think. Actually, you know, I shouldn't say that. Arkansas is a cool state, you know. Johnny Cash, Levon Helm, Charles Portis, but politically it's been pretty rotten.
Yeah.
But,
well,
you know, but there is a soul-corroding effect of military empire. And you know, even this is what always gets me is like these family values types, you know, especially the Beltway types who just, you know, are tools, instruments of the Republican Party. You know, there's no more anti-family policy than having a large military that promiscuously intervenes everywhere. You know, I mean, in time of war, the divorce rate always spikes upward. You know?
Oh yeah, I mean, my I don't want to say exactly who, but in my extended family, we have numerous people who married into the military, in effect, and we sort of weren't sure that was the right thing for them to do, and now it's, well, okay, I'm going to be gone for a year. A year? Like, how is that and defending some outpost that has nothing to do with the United States. And so you're off defending. I mean, it would be one thing if the U.S. was under attack, and what are you going to do? You got to go defend yourself. But you're defending nothingness in a swill of immorality and abandoning your own family. Like, what kind of inverted morality is that?
Yeah, and you know what's obscene is the sight of, say, young mothers, reservists and such, leaving their children to go fight for the empire.
Yeah.
They will go be cogs in the empire's machine. You know, and so you get these, it's not good to watch TV commercials, you know. I find that I've actually been watching the Olympics and enjoying it, but you know, you get these commercials with, like, you know, the parent, you know, the military parent leaving the family, and it's supposed to make us weep, give us you know, a little something in the throat, and it does, to me, only because it's sickening. You know, I mean, the idea that the empire is more important than one's family, and again, I mean, the family values types. I mean, the Republican politicians who profess this. I mean, most of them are on their third wife anyway. You know, the trophy wife.
Oh yeah,
but you know, they're Bob Dole types. But you know, it's just it's appalling. You know, and but there are so few political figures on the right or left that will. You know, that will stand up for the family against the you know, the oppressive nature of the empire. You know.
Well, you know, I sometimes think, Bill, in my really cynical moments, that the architects of the warfare state actually get a literal chuckle out of the rubes who go along with all this, who accept all the officially proffered rationales for the wars and for the empire. They accept it wholeheartedly. They go on right-wing radio and righteously express their agreement with everything being said. And of course, none of it is true. It's all BS. And meanwhile, they're sacrificing what little wealth they have to be part of it, either to be in the military or whatever else. And they're going off sort of unquestioningly doing this, and I bet you the architects of the empire had no idea how easy of a time they'd have of it persuading people to do this.
Yeah. I agree, Tom.
All right, now
agree.
Listen, let me ask you, Bill, I mean, you were sort of hinting at this just a minute ago, that there's no politician out there who's really going to put it quite this way. Now, there are some who are sort of okay on the war issue, like Walter Jones is a great example. He's a guy who stood to gain nothing in a military district in, I guess, North Carolina. He had nothing to gain from turning anti-war. And yet he turned anti-war and he denounced Dick Cheney, and it's fantastic. But you're right. And so my question to you is, are you really kind of like an ideological orphan out there? Like, I kind of think of Bill Kaufman as being sui generis. Like, there is no Kaufmanian party out there. Like, you wouldn't be comfortable in the Libertarian Party. You wouldn't be comfortable in the Democrats and the Republicans. You're just you. Is there a broader, I don't know, movement or something out there that you feel connected to? Or do you feel like I'm Bill Kaufman and I'm just doing the best I can as a one-man band?
All right, you remember me of the old Kinks song? I'm not like anybody else, but
Right.
but actually I am like others. And I mean, I do. I actually vote. I mean, I tend to vote at the local level. I know people, so I'll vote either for whoever I think has best character. At state and national level, I usually vote either Green or Libertarian. But and there are a handful of interesting political figures. I'm a fan of Ralph Nader's, for instance, and of course Ron Paul is terrific. Jimmy Duncan, but there is a reaction to all this, I think, but you're seeing it culturally, but you don't see it politically. You see it just in a lot of little things, whether it's farm markets, community-supported agriculture, regional, literary movements, that kind of thing. I mean, there's a lot of people have the sense that the bigness has somehow kind of detached us from the real thing, and they're trying to get back to it. And it doesn't have a political expression because it encompasses everyone from kind of hippie organic farmers to Christians homeschooling their kids. And these people, a lot of times there are certain what I think are fairly unimportant surface cultural social differences that keep them apart, but they really belong together. And I think actually, I mean, I'm kind of hopeful, at least at the local level, where I think if people can know each other, they can overcome these things. I mean, I think about, like a board that I've been involved with, and two members, one this gay guy, and one is this Assembly of God woman. So, you might think, well, they're going to be at each other's throats, but in fact, they're not, because they know each other as rounded, multi-dimensional human beings.
Yes.
I mean, this, the guy's sexuality, the woman's religion. I mean, it's a feature, but it's not their entirety. And so they can work together and be friends and engage in kind of, these labors of love. And I think that can happen locally. But once you get to a certain scale where they just start becoming one-dimensional figures, it's like, oh, you're a religious nut. Oh, you're a fag. I mean that kind of caricaturing, stereotyping, that kind of rancor seeps in, and any kind of conversation becomes impossible. It's just name calling.
Yeah, and so the purpose
that's one reason why I think we really need to devolve political power to the most local level. Because I mean, there's a possibility then of harmony, of people are still going to disagree, but there'll be a kind of comedy,
Yeah, right, and right, exactly. That people, and you mean COMITY, right? I mean,
yeah,
so
of course, it would also be COMEDY, which is fine.
That's right. But people would view each other not as categories, but as human beings. Whereas you watch Rachel Maddow, and I don't want to just pick on her, or you listen to Rush Limbaugh, and their job is to make sure that you and that other person who is ideologically different from you never have a meeting of the minds, because that person becomes the enemy, instead of, okay, this person disagrees with me on things that matter to me strongly, but this is still a human being. Almost all these people are human beings, right? And can't we try as neighbors to come up with some kind of way that we can live together that makes both of us happy, without leaving Rachel Maddow out of the picture, and not thinking in terms of categories, but just one human being talking to another. I mean, it's so rare to be able to do that. Let me tell you one quick thing, Bill. I had a little book some years ago. In fact, you may even be in it, I think. We Who Dared to Say No to War. It's a collection of anti-war writings.
Yes, you and Murray Palmer, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so Murray's a great guy, total leftist, right? But such a sweet when he wants to be, but tough as nails when you get him upset. But what's great about that is that on paper, we're supposed to not like each other. But, it's good that we live our lives in flesh and blood and not on paper, because Murray and I got along great, and that project was great. But the unfortunate thing is that is so rare. I want to see more of this, and yet Murray and Tom Woods working together is so much the exception.
But there's always this. I mean, the corporate media love to describe certain coalitions as strange bedfellows. I remember in the 90s, against NAFTA, strange bedfellows. Right. Against the Iraq War, strange bedfellows. Well, I mean, geez, people, eventually you find, I'm always climbing into bed in a chaste way with these people.
Yeah, right.
I mean, maybe we're natural allies. I mean, you've seen it, heck, Ralph Nader and Ron Paul, certainly they disagree on a lot of things, the nature of capitalism and others, but, they're always lining up together.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I think it makes sense for those camps to be roughly in alignment, and it doesn't mean you're subordinating your principles or anything like that. But we we need to get along. As you say, well, I'm afraid my train of thought derailed. But you know the point I'm making.
No, of course. And the opposite thing would be they never say, "Gosh, it's strange bedfellows. Hillary Clinton, Howard Stern, John McCain, and Rush Limbaugh are all for the war." Isn't that funny? Well, why is that not strange bedfellows? Well, maybe because it's so damn predictable. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, I've exhausted us both, denouncing all the badness, but trying to elicit what is best in this country. I still refuse to be a long-run pessimist, because I do think that out there, if only people could get past the gatekeepers of approved opinion, there are people who are prepared to talk common sense ways about living in a more humane way and interacting with each other in a more humane way. And if we ever get there, it'll be in good measure due to the work of a renegade like you.
Oh, Tom, you're too kind. But I agree. I'm I'm an optimist. I mean, I'm sometimes I'm a bit Pollyanna-ish even, but I'm an optimist too. I mean, the political signs will lag behind the cultural indices, but people are not meant to live. Most people want to be citizens of the republic rather than subjects of the empire.
Well, listen, Bill, I'm going to let you run. We got to talk to you more often. I appreciate you doing this.
Well, hey, glad chatting with you, Tom. Oh, and one other thing, can I just mention that
Please
this
do.
spring, Front Porch Republic Books, which is a new imprint, along with from Woodfin Stock, which is a good academic press on the West Coast, is going to be publishing a collection of my writings over the last 28 years.
I was going to ask you about what you're up to these days, and we got caught up in talking. I totally forgot. Well, that's great to know.
Yeah. So the title is Poetry Night at the Ballpark and Other Scenes from an Alternative America. So.
All right. Well, now, do you know the exact month?
It looks like May. Yeah.
Oh, did you just say? Okay. Yeah. So let's have you back around then. We'll talk about that book.
Hey, that'd be cool, Tom.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill. Okay, everybody, I just want to remind you where I'm going to be in the coming weeks. I've got events around the country that I would love for you to attend if you can. First, just a reminder that listeners of this program get a special discount at my libertyclassroom.com, which is my site where you can learn the history and economics they didn't dare teach you when you were in school. And you can learn those things at your convenience. libertyclassroom.com with coupon code SHOW in all caps. As for where I'm going to be, March 1st, I'll be at the College of Southern Idaho. March 5th, Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas. March 15th, the University of Central Arkansas. April 9th, Florida Southern College. And April 10th, Liberty University. You can get the details on these and all my events at tomwoods.com, my personal site. The events page is tomwoods.com/events. All my events are open to the public. Another week of programs has come and gone. Make sure you're a subscriber on iTunes and Stitcher so you don't miss a single one of these precious gems. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
The Tom Woods Show.